I played Mouthwashing, and it is deeply disturbing. It's a horror game, but I'm not scared. It's only 3 hours long, but it left me stun-locked and traumatized for hours after. How does Mouthwashing manage to do this? The story follows a shipwrecked crew of 5 people, struggling to survive with limited supplies stranded in space. For the first half of the game, we play as Jimmy, the technician turned captain, trying to keep the crew alive and manage resources effectively. As the game progresses, we find out that a horrifying event has taken place, and from here on, we're confronted with the terrible consequences of this dark moment. And that's exactly it. Mouthwashing is about confronting your own demons. There are barely any jump scares in the game, but the true horror comes from your own mind. The game lures you in with an innocent resource management mechanism, then out of nowhere, it slaps you with a world-shattering realization. You are the true monster. Everything terrible that happens in this game, it's all because of you. Then it forces you to sit with the stomach-turning disgust, gut-wrenching guilt, and the utter fear of the inescapable execution, all brought down by something you did at your worst moment. Normally, when a game forces you to go through a series of actions and leaves you with no agency to choose your own fate, it can easily create that sense of cheapness in the experience. You ask yourself, what's the point if it's all going to shits anyway? Then you stop caring, and the game becomes another unremarkable title amongst all the other middling games you've played. But Mouthwashing is different. The true mastery is that it not only shoves the disgusting truth in your mouth, but it makes you willingly swallow it and mindfully digest it. But in order to do this, Mouthwashing can't be a book, a movie, or a painting. It has to be a video game. And I'm gonna show you why. Amongst all the multidimensional artistic mediums, video games have one huge and unique advantage: player agency. By putting you, the player, in the driver's seat, video games allow you to take control of your own narrative and fully immerse yourself in the world of that game. Modern games spend millions of dollars developing game engines, aiming to provide that unprecedented player experience by continuing to expand on the scope of player agency. Many AAA game studios boast their advancement in player movement and ability to customize and pursue their own objectives. But Mouthwashing's approach to player agency is not to provide maximum freedom to player control. It is acutely self-aware that the different modes of player interactions and agency within the game induce different emotional experiences. For a psychological horror game, that emotional experience is the core of the game's identity. Let's look at some examples. Walking is a basic movement in almost every game, and for a narrative game, oftentimes it can feel like a walking simulator. Go here, talk to this person, go over there, do this task. Each individual task is given to you one at a time, so you just end up walking around in circles trying to locate these NPCs and locations. For Mouthwashing, walking is also your primary mode of interaction. The interesting thing here is that Mouthwashing utilizes the direction of your walking as a mechanism for modulating your emotional experience at a given moment. At the start of the game, right after the ship crash, I walked around the different rooms and floors of the ship, completing different tasks. The game indicated interactable items by bracketing said item, so it was very clear on what I was supposed to do. It was a little bit of a point and click. About 30 minutes into the game, something extraordinarily weird happened. One of the characters told me to go to the cockpit, so I navigated through the multiple gates that would take me there. I walked down the stairs to get to the lower level, but then the stairs just kept going and going and going and going, until there was nowhere else to go except to jump off a platform that wasn't there before. I thought I was tripping. The screen went black. Then I plummeted into the water. I stood up and looked around, and there I was in the middle of a blood ocean. For me, it was right around this point in the game I realized that Mouthwashing was not a normal horror game. There was no logic, paranormal or not, that could explain why I was suddenly in a different realm of existence. It was also the first point in the game where there was no clear direction on where to go. Every way I turned, it was the endless ocean. This kind of mirrored what consciousness feels like. There's no beginning, no end, just endless space in every direction. There was no way of knowing which way was the right way to go, so I just started walking. The music intensified, and broken ladders popped out of the water. My fear grew with every step I took. Then the screen faded to white. I was now in a white void with the cockpit door far off in the distance. In both instances, the lack of direction and orientation instigated a sense of fear of the unknown. The white void, especially, is commonly used in depictions of near-death experiences and heaven. Being able to find the door to escape this endless void became the only hope I had. Thematically, this sudden shift in game reality was triggered by the first clear foreshadowing of the upcoming incident. Mouthwashing utilized this change of orientation as a moment of pause before the dominoes started falling. At the time of play, I experienced the fear of the nothingness, and now that I know how the events would unfold, looking back at this experience stirred up even more fear. This was the beginning of the end. One mechanic Mouthwashing employs that I have never seen in another video game before was this concept of backstepping. Near the end of the game, after all awful things were said and done, I entered another cerebral realm. There was a sticky note on an air vent that said, "No turning back now." This note was a double entendre. In lore, the ugly deed had been done, so there was no turning back now. This part made sense. But what was so genius about this design was the fact that in order to progress, I literally could not turn my camera around to face the backside. I didn't realize this at the start and attempted to turn around multiple times, only for my screen to fade to black and a flashing warning sign to take responsibility for my actions. The only way to go to the next place was to maintain my camera facing forward and slowly backstep. In the pitch-black darkness, all I could do was stare at the ominous note as I backstepped, hoping I wouldn't fall upon a corpse or something much, much worse. I was stripped of freedom of sight, only being able to see the forceful demand that I take responsibility. This particular method of agency deprivation was a deliberate choice on the game's part. There was another method Mouthwashing could have employed to convey that no turning back now message, such as hard restricting my camera movement to only lock onto the note and therefore have no choice but to backstep. But by limiting the freedom to move my scope, that feeling of being restricted would overshadow the comprehension of the message itself. The third instance, and the most prominent showcase of this deprivation of agency, was the final moments of the game. It was one of the few parts of the game where I was in the disfigured body of the former ship captain, Curly. The entire crew had died in the ship at this point, and all there was left was Jimmy and me. Jimmy put me in a cryopod, then shut the glass door. He spoke to me on the other side of the glass, and his words didn't feel right. It felt like something terrible was about to happen. In my panicked attempt to open the cryo door to stop whatever horrifying thing that was about to happen, I realized something even more terrifying. I was paralyzed. I could not move. I could, however, move my camera. I looked around to see if there was anything I could do at all, and for the first time in the entire game, I moved my camera down and saw Curly's chopped up legs. The very ones I had chopped up earlier in the game myself. Talk about dramatic irony. Camera scope and walking are the two most basic functions in a video game, yet Mouthwashing's tactful withholding of player agency shapes the narrative, and not just a frustrating game design bug. Deprivation of agency jump-started my morbid curiosity and investigation into this horrid crime, yet this was only step one in Mouthwashing's masterful plan. What differentiates a psychological horror game from a traditional horror game is that the fear stems from different places. A traditional horror game often relies on bodily sensations like adrenaline and shock to induce fear. Your body's natural response to stimuli tells you that you should be afraid. Psychological horror, however, induces fear because your mind fills in the gaps with the worst things your brain can come up with. However, it does require a level of emotional vulnerability and willingness from the audience to genuinely engage for this type of horror to fully take its impact. Mouthwashing uses some interesting techniques to implement this process. About 1 minute into the prologue of Mouthwashing, there were lines of text indicating the basic information of the context: ship name, crew number, etc. Then, at the very end, there was a line of text that seemed entirely out of place. "I hope this hurts." It seemed like a developer's message. Why would it hurt? My brain already started asking questions. Then my screen froze, and a sound that is really hard to describe. 8 seconds. That was how long this frame lasted. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it was just long enough for me to feel the EBGBs and deeply unsettled. This freeze frame was a snapshot of part of the narrative, but it was intrusive to the narrative. Throughout the game, this freeze frame intrusion happened a total of 17 times, each time accompanied by either complete silence or this disturbing sound. Each time, something horrible had just happened, and my consciousness was interrupted by these lingering frames. My mind filled in these gaps with the worst imaginations and associations each time, and I can assure you I have a very creative imagination. For Mouthwashing to coerce me into accepting this tragedy, intrusive confrontation was a necessary step towards the goal. Another unique method deployed was flashing text walls. At certain points in the game, Mouthwashing broke the fourth wall and invaded the narrative with what I would consider to be developer messages. A few key phrases are safety, take responsibility, be quiet, take care of it, and of course, I hope this hurts. They were always in all caps and took up the entire screen in the most intrusive way. To me, they simulated moments of conscience. It was easy to get swept up in the chaos, in the action, just like everyday life. But these intrusive moments broke up the momentum and reminded me of the right thing to do. Now that Mouthwashing had lured me in, it invaded my experience of the narrative with its own messaging. But to truly get me to accept its ethos, Mouthwashing forced me to experience gruesome outcomes of the events and confront my own fears. I'm always more receptive to consequences when I feel like I was the one who made the choice. Oppositional reflex, I suppose. Unfortunately, Mouthwashing is acutely aware of this, and through the illusion of choice, it subtly manipulated me into violent confrontations of the dark side of humanity. "I'm pregnant," Anya said. There were 4 men and 1 woman. What happened here? Well, the medical room was a frequented location throughout the game because the former Captain Curly was gravely injured during the crash and had been bedridden there. But the very last time the game made me go to the medical room, Anya had overdosed by Curly's bedside. Why would she do this? Not too long after, I entered the cerebral realm once again. There was a pulsing organ and an ultrasound scanner with a note, "Take care of it." I picked up the scanner to use on the organ, and there was a fetus inside. "I hope it hurts," the screen flashed. Then, in the middle of a dark hallway, there was a centipede-shaped monster made up of organ parts. I would die if it caught up to me and had to restart all over again. By leaving me with no choice but to face the death of Anya, investigate the fetus, then be hunted by the fetus monster, there was the shape of a dark narrative. At this point in the game, I had already realized that I, Jimmy, was the true perpetrator all along. Swansea, the technician, knew of Jimmy's dark deeds and tried to execute him for his sins, but Jimmy stubbornly thought he could fix it all and continued to deny what had happened. Swansea's attempt at executing Jimmy was the end for him. Jimmy had gotten the upper hand. There was truly no other form of confrontation that would be more violent than for Jimmy to raise the gun at Swansea's head. I had sided with Jimmy at the start of the game, because why wouldn't I? I had the choice to pursue the right things, do the right deeds. But somewhere along the way, I, the player, had thoroughly separated from Jimmy. I did not condone his actions, but I was in too deep. I no longer had the option to say, that's not what I would have done. I became the perpetrator. It was through the invisible hand that slowly pulled the agency from my hands I had unwillingly witnessed the hidden, hated, taboo side of humanity. If you had shoved it in front of me at the very start, I don't know if I would shy away. It's too dark. There is a famous proverb, you can't wake a person who's pretending to be asleep. This is true. Mouthwashing is a deeply unsettling and uncomfortable game to play. Not only is the topic at hand so vile that I'm not even sure I can fully discuss it here on YouTube, but even after the event, our protagonist tries to avoid the consequences of his own actions. It is a disturbing experience on our conscience, and we, as the player, reflexively attempt to escape the psychological impact. Instead of forcing you to sit through a stomach-turning event at the start of the game and risk losing your emotional vulnerability, Mouthwashing lures you in softly with the promise of agency. It's okay, you won't have to face anything you don't want to. Make yourself at home and take your time, it says. You get comfortable in that freedom of choice, so comfortable that you don't even realize that Mouthwashing wants to take away your agency. But wait just a moment, not all at once. With every passing minute of the game, you lose a little bit of agency. Slowly, you get cornered, and your scope of agency becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually, the game stops pretending altogether. At the end of the game, Mouthwashing leaves you with no agency. Well, actually, you have the freedom to move your camera around to look at your paralyzed and disfigured body. You get to open your big eyes and watch the last person alive put you in a glass container and put a gun to their head. You can watch, but you can't move. You have just enough agency to feel utterly helpless. You have no choice but to confront your own demons and own up to the worst moments of your life. There was no other medium that would allow Mouthwashing to recruit you into helpless acceptance other than the sick sleight of hand that only video games can achieve. You might be able to accept the horror of scary monsters, but I doubt you would accept the horror of realizing that the scary monster is you. And this is why Mouthwashing has to be a video game. Mouthwashing is a game about a group of people slowly going insane in a stranded ship. But you know who I would like to be stranded in space with? My patrons! But seriously, you guys have been such great company, and I love that I can always have insightful conversations on videos I'm working on and future brainstorming. All of my videos will be live on Patreon a week before YouTube, and I've started a monthly series called Tea Time where I just sit down and chat about recent game news, Q&As, and more. Check out the links in the description box down below. I would love to see you there. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye.